So, Kason, come on over. You can bring your flag. Okay, so this is my son Kason. He just got back from a Brian Newbert clinic in California, where he's been learning horsemanship for how long you studied horsemanship? Since he was, when did you get bucked off for the first time?
I don't know. Only got bucked off once, and that was at a Brandon.
Oh, you got bucked off Misty, remember? The one time we were out riding, and Kason's been riding since before he was born, actually, in his mom's belly. We were riding, he was riding this little pony, and he went across the ditch. And do you want to tell the story?
I don't even remember it.
Okay, he doesn't remember, but we remember. So the pony's name was Tinker. And Tinker didn't like to walk through water. So as horses sometimes do, when they get up against water, they'll sit back and then lunge. And when old Tinker lunged, well, Kason stayed back and he fell off. And he started to cry like he was gonna die. And
You don't have to tell him very good stories.
the thing that stopped him crying was when his mom rode up and said, "Hey, Kason, guess what? You got bucked off." And he stood up and brushed himself off and he says, "Yeah, I did. I got bucked off." So then he had to go and tell all the crew, everybody that was with us, "I got bucked off." He was
No,
pretty...
Mom said, now you can tell everybody that you got bucked off.
That's right. And you did. You told everybody. So he was pretty proud of that. That was probably when he was about 3 years old. How old are you now?
11.
So 11. So he's been a horseman. Horses are part of our livelihood. They're a tool that we use here on the ranch. This is our ranch. We manage the acres back behind us. It's a family operation. I'm the 3rd generation. Kason's the 4th generation, and we've got 5 other children. My wife Selena is here. She's going to help participate today, and this is being videoed, so we can use this for training purposes in the future. So, with those things established, we'll I've got a few notes and a few things that we're going to go through. First of all, when working with horses, we got another bunch of horses coming in, so it's a little bit of a distraction. But we're gonna assume that he knows nothing. So we really don't know. This is a horse that came from my father-in-law. We don't know exactly how he was raised or what he's been exposed to. We aren't really sure that he's ever been haltered. And so whenever we get in a new horse, we kind of take that assumption and we start from where they are and we determine what they know, and then we go forward. We go forward from there. So I think that he's been haltered, but we're just going to assume that he hasn't been. So Kason has a tool, which is a flag, and he's just going to go. And so the first thing we got to do is, horses don't speak English, and I don't speak horse, but there are some languages here that we can help to communicate across species. So horses understand pressure and they understand release. So a flag is a means of being able to apply pressure, and release means you allow them to find a space where there's no longer pressure, and they find that. So that's the language that they understand. If you watch mares and colts, that's how they speak to each other. If a colt's getting too close, well, the mare will pressure him, nip him, kick at him to get him to move away. So go ahead, Kason, and you can just walk out in the middle. And what we're gonna try to do is to go ahead. No, just go ahead and flag him, just like you would if you didn't know what was going on. I'll kind of move over here to the corner and I'll keep narrating, but we can keep the camera on Kason. So what our objective here is just, I'll come over here so everybody can hear. Our objective here again is to find out what the horse knows. So if he comes to Kason takes off the pressure. If he does anything but look at him or step towards him, then the pressure's on. And again, he's got some distractions, but we're not going to pay a lot of attention. There's always going to be distractions. There's these other horses here, there's people here, there's cameras. Okay, so he looks again at Kason backs up, takes the pressure off. and he keeps coming. We don't know if he's coming to get the other horses or if he's just coming to be friendly with Kaysen, but he'll take advantage of that because he's in a position where if he wants to come and mother up to the other horses, well, Kaysen's in the middle. So it's kind of using his natural instincts. And so long as his focus is anywhere but on Kaysen, he keeps the pressure on, and especially if he turns tail to him, he can really pour on the pressure with that flag. Now that flag is just an extension of Kaysen. It's just, you know, he could be doing this with a rope, he could be doing it with a body, he could be doing it from another horse. We're working on the ground here because a lot of people don't, especially if you're starting out with horses, you may not have the confidence to be able to do this from a horse. So this is kind of a pretty safe way to do it. Again, we want to keep Kaysen, whoever's working with him, keep him safe. And so the horses, it's not that they're inherently lazy, but this is work for him to move. So he gave us some signs there. He turned, faced him with both eyes. His ears are locked on Kaysen. He's forgot about the horses that are over here. And he gave a little bit of a lick of the lips there, which means I accept. So those are all cues that you can pick up on when a horse is locked on with you. You know, first, generally it'll start with the ear. The inside ear will face you. And that means that wherever that ear is pointing, that's where their eye is going. So you can just start walking in at a kind of an arc, Kaysen, and it's not that he wants him to stay. He's giving him lots of room. You know, the horse has a choice to go anywhere. It's not a matter of force here. And in some regards there. So kind of what he's looking at doing is getting his hind end to move and break loose, and then the front end will come along. So he's walking over towards his hip, he breaks loose, he moves. And then he might walk over and get this eye. And again, he's got a lot of options. Horses, people, we don't like to be cornered. We don't like to be forced. And so it's better if you present something new as an option. Say, hey, this is good. This is comfortable for you. If you want to leave, go ahead and leave. I'm not forcing you to stay. And if he leaves, then you just kind of help him. Now really you can put the pressure on. He's not at all there. So again, his ears are locked on. It's not so much that Kaysen wants to be careful here. Careful meaning that if he takes a misstep and Kaysen trips and the horse leaves, good. No, he made the choice to leave. It wasn't Kaysen's fault, it was his choice. So it's not, I guess it's not that you have to pussyfoot around, or a lot of good horse trainers, they seem really aggressive, but then when the horse yields, they are really soft. And that's basically, again, the way that a mare treats a colt. If they're in trouble, if they're getting too close, or if a mare sees that it needs to get out of there, they'll get real aggressive. They'll bare their teeth and get after him. But then the next second, they'll be mothered up to him and be comforting him. And that's when I say speak their language, that's the language that they understand. You know, you can talk to a horse all day long in English or Spanish or whatever language you want to speak. Yes, they can learn voice commands, but they don't naturally know that. they do understand pressure and they do understand relief. So it might seem like, you know, this is a long drawn out process. We could speed the process up, we could go get a rope, we could rope him, we could get him haltered. But what's our objective? Is it to get the horse caught, or is it to get him to yield the pressure? And so traditional, I guess, would be in a corral like this, you'd probably have a snubbing post out in the middle of the corral, about where Cason's, right in the middle of the corral. You'd rope the horse, you'd snub it up to that post, might get a halter on it, saddle it, knock it down if you needed to, get it saddled. The objective was to get on its back and stay there. There was a pretty high tendency that the cowboy was going to get hurt, the horse could get hurt, other people could get hurt doing that. And it's not to say that that way is bad and this way is good, or this way is better. It's a different way. It's just an alternative. The likelihood of anybody getting hurt this way is less, and it's not stressful. It's not stressful on anybody. It seems like it takes more time because, you know, somebody else could probably already have him saddled by now and be stepped on him. But then what have you got? Building a relationship of trust is what this does. So there's a high level of confidence that if it's done correctly, and I say correctly, that doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. Sometimes you have to make a mistake to realize that you're in the right position. And so it's not so much about being afraid of doing something wrong, it's recognizing it and being able to correct it quickly. So again, if Cason makes a misstep or approaches him too close and the horse leaves, that's not the end of the world. Where's he going to go? You know, the worst thing he could do, he could jump out of here. He's probably not going to do that. It has happened though. It has. We've had that before. So yeah, the difference is this is based on trust. The other method, okay, and then you can just back up so he's kind of locked onto you. The other method is more of a fear or force. So it's not breaking him, it's gentling him, it's making the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy. That's the foundation for what Ray Hunt taught, one of the great horsemen. So I'd say go ahead and just grab a halter, Cason, and there again, a halter is a tool. You know, we could saddle him without a halter, but at some point you're going to need to get a hold of his mouth and his face to be able to steer him to do a job. Again, a halter is a means to be able to do that. So if he wants to leave, then we're going to let him leave, and that's fine. But there will be pressure if he does. So Cason can just approach him. The most intimidating place for somebody to be is right between a horse's front eyes, because their vision is limited, because they are an animal that's preyed upon. Their eyes are placed on the sides of their head, whereas predatory animals have their eyes placed in front. And so that was a big point of trust right there that Cason reached, to be able to allow somebody to scratch them between the eyes. They're very vulnerable, and so you don't always want to do that. A lot of times a safer place to approach them is on their neck, because they can still see out of their peripheral vision. He may want to sniff you, and if he does, that's fine. And again, you can see Cason's not forcing him to be there. He's got, 180 degrees or more that he can get away from him. And if you get to that point and you're worried, I mean, if they lay their ears back and they're going to strike, or generally you'll see indicators before now. But this keeps you safe, and it keeps them safe. The fact that we started with the flag and that he accepted that shows a pretty good sign that he's not that way. He's not gonna retaliate. So we've talked about basically two principles: one, speaking their language; second, building trust. I think in whatever relationship you have, those are key. If you find that you're frustrated with somebody, it's generally because you're not understanding them. It's easy to point out, well, it's their fault. But what are you doing to understand them, to ask questions? And that's kind of what you're doing here. You're just checking in with him and saying, hey, is everything all right? Are you okay with me here? Are you okay with me being up close to you? Like there, he kind of wanted to nose into Kaysen. So the next principle would be establish respect. So it's, I respect your space, but you need to respect mine too. A horse can be overly friendly, and that can be almost more dangerous than one that is standoffish. I mean, I'd a lot rather have a horse that wanted to keep its distance than was right on top of you, because they can push you around, and that it's not the horse's fault. They were taught that behavior. At some point in their life, they were allowed to push somebody over, and they weren't taught that, hey, I have space here. So again, he's just kind of learning, and so that's good, Kaysen. So he's not completely accepting it, but he's not rejecting it, because he could leave. He chooses to move with his hind end and keep his front end locked on. And so where you can get in trouble is when they turn and put their hip towards you, and then they can kick. So in that instance, if you were to react that way, then you would really pour on the pressure and say, no, that's not acceptable. I need to see your front end at this point. So while he didn't just stand up there like an old broke horse and let Kaysen throw his rope over and catch him, for what he is, he did really good. So so now he's got another tool. So he's locked onto Kaysen. And again, just watch for the subtle indicators of where his eyes are, what his body's doing, and trust your own intuition too. If you feel like something's wrong, then step back for a second, let him have some space. We're 20 minutes into this, and so again, we could have stepped out here and roped him and had him haltered in 2 or 3 minutes. But what else has he done in that time? How much ground has he covered? And he's done a lot more things than just getting him haltered. So you have to be really clear on what your objective is when you go out to work with animals or work with people. Do you just want them to do something? Or do you want them to be something? Because you can force them to do, but you can't force the becoming. That has to come from inside. That's voluntary. And so while animals are more instinctual in nature, and they don't have the level of agency that people have, in that they reason and can draw upon past experience like people can, they still, their instincts dictate their choices as well as their experiences. Okay, so he's kind of favoring that left eye, and he says, I haven't seen you out of this other eye yet. And a lot of horses are that way, and that's an easy thing to break. So Kaysen's just kind of staying in there, and okay, and then as soon as he stops, Kaysen will take the pressure off or pet him. So now at this point, he's just going to stay there until his feet quit moving, and just stay there until his feet quit moving, and then he'll release the pressure and just try to stay in that right eye position. There. So now he looked at him out of that eye and he's okay with it. See how Kaysen didn't just go and went right to scratching on him. He kind of simulated the movement with his hand, and so that helped him to accept it. Again, this might seem like we're taking this to the extreme. You know, a guy could do this faster. If it works for you to do it faster, then great. But you can miss some things in the steps if you're hurrying. I know there's been great horsemen, and I'm not discounting the way that anybody else would do it. Just as I don't discount the way my father or grandfather did things, because they did the best that they knew, and they got results, and ultimately that's what we're after. So the difference in trust would be that when you build a horse's trust and you build we're going to talk later about building their confidence, then when they're out in a different situation, they're going to rely on you instead of on instinct. So they can come back to, okay, you know, I faced a high pressure situation before, and it turned out all right. So that may be if you're trotting out and you get caught in the wire, and instead of him just panicking and hurting himself and hurting you, if you take a hold of him, he'll say, okay, things are okay, because it was okay in the past.
Recognize that this may be slower, but in the end, you're going to be more safe. The horse is going to be more safe, and you know, eventually, the old cowboys, they got the horses to trust them, and they had a good relationship with them. But there was a lot of times where they were hurt, or the horses were hurt, and this just makes it so that you take out a lot of the risk that is out there working with a big animal like this. You almost prepare them for everything that you're going to face before you even get on them, and then when you get on them, they're just okay with it because you already prepared them in every way that you can. So it takes out a lot of the risk.
So maybe we'll go and, yeah, you gotta.
Yeah, it seems to me like the more time you spend building the foundation of trust and confidence in you know, from the horse, that since it takes, you know, so much time to train a horse, and there's, you know, once you get past these basic training methods that you need to do, and you get on to more advanced training, it seems to me like it'd come a lot easier if you've spent more time building that, and the horse will learn quicker in the long run, and it'll just make your job easier and his job easier eventually.
I think that's true. You said something really key there, foundation, and that's what all this is just a foundation. It doesn't mean that, you know, he's going to be able to go out and get a job done on him today, but that's not our objective. You know, that for us, for somebody else, maybe they don't have the time to do this, and maybe they need to go and, you know, they got an older horse and they need to just get him right out and do a job. So I'll walk over here to Kaysen, and so what are you doing? What are you doing here, Kaysen?
Just working with them so they're not so tight. Bumping them.
Okay. So I'm kind of a new pressure out here, and I'm not trying to be. I'm just trying to stay right behind Kaysen, so Kaysen and I are more or less one. So he's simulating some of the things that will happen when this horse is saddled, and he's going to have a saddle which is going to touch him everywhere that Kaysen's touching him. So it's not so much that we're trying to desensitize him to the little taps and rubs and things. We're getting him to accept that, because that's what's going to happen when you throw your tack up on there. You know, he's going to get thumped and whacked, and so if he's okay with the hand there, then the likelihood of him standing while you get him cinched up is better. So
one of the main reasons is you're getting him loose. I'm putting my hand right in his flank and right behind the shoulder, and that's kind of one of the places where they're the tightest. And when they get loose, then you give him relief. So I'll just keep bumping him until he gets loose.
What do you mean by loose? What does that feel like
He
or look like?
relaxes the muscles. They're not so tight there.
Okay.
So when you're riding, if they're tight, they're probably gonna buck. Because when you're cinching them up and stuff, you can take a rope and put it over them, and that's kind of like a cinch in the saddle. And then once they get loose, then that's better, because when you're cinching them up, they might just go to bucking and break your saddle because you don't have them all the way cinched up. Or when you get on them, if they're not loose, they could buck.
So basically, the way that you can tell if they're loose is they relax their muscles.
Yeah.
So you can practice that on Kaysen here. He's trying to flinching until he accepts that. There, and then you can pet on him. Good Kaysen. So again, that the kind of to bring this back to how it might relate to people is that in a relationship with whoever it is, whether it's a marriage or a business relationship, you're going to come at it from a different angle than the other person is. And so your approach may be abrasive to them. Just, that's not our intent here with this horse, but we're helping him to say, okay, this is okay. I understand what you're doing, and I'm okay with that. Because you offer him a sense of relief and release when he yields and when he relaxes or becomes loose, as Kaysen explained. So how do you tell that with people? Again, there's subtle indicators that you can look for with people, whether it's in their body language, their own tone, the words that they say. You can tell if they're seeing us as a predator or threatening them, or if they're accepting us in our position. And so I think the key here is that Kaysen is the one that's doing all of the adjusting to the horse and where he is. And with people, it's the same way. If we expect everybody else to change to make us happy, then we're going to have a pretty miserable life, because they're not going to. So what we're looking for here is just to verify and see where the horse is, what he can accept. Well, that was kind of a lot. Now it's getting back behind his legs, and that's something new, and that might spook him a little bit at first. This colt is really smart. He learns really fast. The other horses, it might take longer. But it's important to take the horse for where he's at and just start with him there and work from there. So he's getting some new things presented to him. He's deciding whether it's acceptable or not. So this is simulating what it would be like with the cinch. That's right where your cinch is going to go when you're saddled, and it's a real safe way to be able to tickle him there and even simulate the pressure of a cinch. And then you can help him to, with that pressure on, to go forward, to lead. Because that's important that they remember that when things get tight, they can move and they can stop. So the reason a lot of people get in trouble when they saddle for the first time is that they focus so much on getting the horse to stand that then when they do go to move, everything is new and tight and scary. and that it overexposes them. Whereas if you start this way, then it's not, it's not so scary to them. It might be new, but it's not. They've already learned that they can accept the pressure, they can move, they can stop. So this casein stays off to the side. He's in a real safe position, and there's kind of a fine line here between keeping the pressure on while the horse is moving and not overexposing him. So in other words, if the pressure's tight, you want to keep it constant until they change, until they show a sign of acceptance. It's not so much because they're moving, you're going to increase the pressure and tighten up that rope, because then that just violated one of our first rules, which was trust. Which if things start to go bad, don't turn to self-preservation, turn to me for the answers. So now he's helping him to realize that he can move with things getting tight around him. And if things get really bothersome, he can just drop the rope and start over, rather than try to hang in there and get himself in a bad position where he could get kicked or scare the horse. Just let go. It's important that you always keep an option open for yourself and for the horse. When you limit yourself, then that's when somebody or something gets hurt. So key to this, we talked about building trust and establishing respect, verifying where the horse is at, and interlaced with all this is constant adjustment. So it's frustrating when either with people or horse trainers or whatever it might be, they just say, okay, here's what you need to do to get this done. Go take this step, do this, this, and this, and it's going to get you there. Those are the practices, but unless you understand the underlying principles, to me it leads to frustration, because each horse is different and each person is different. Just because it worked for my neighbor doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for me. Or just because it worked for this horse doesn't mean it's going to work for the next horse. So I guess we'll go over here. I have some audience participation. So what are the underlying principles that you see? Well, I mean, what are you learning here, Seth?
What I've learned is basically you got to learn to have an understanding from the horse's position or other people's position to help understand how to approach them and work with them like that. Kind of what I've picked up so far.
Okay. So have an understanding of their position.
Yeah, where have they come from? Like, what if there's something in the past that's happened to them, and you need to kind of work with them from that perspective of, like maybe he had a bad incident with this one scenario, so when you go to do that scenario, you need to understand that he's had a bad incident, so you need to kind of work through it with him put a little more effort into it to work through it with him.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Yeah, so it doesn't make the horse necessarily good or bad just because he had a bad experience.
Yeah.
Just realize that, right? And
then just kind of recognize that he had a bad experience. It may have been his fault, may have not been his fault, but either way, you need to understand that a bad thing happened there, so you need to kind of work with them through it a little more, maybe a little more quieter or some other direction, basically, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. So as the trainer, you're the one that's responsible. Again, you can't guarantee, especially when you ride horses for other people, you can't guarantee what they've been exposed to, where they've been. Justin had one of the toughest horses I've seen that he started over Christmas. And it was a horse that really lacked respect. It was a horse that was just been raised right around people, was treated as a pet, and would just walk over the top of you. He learned to use his weight to pull away from you. He would strike and kick and try to nip at you. And it wasn't so much that he was being mean, it was just that was his instinct, and that's what he'd gotten away with.
He just never learned respect for his handlers.
And that was a tough deal for Justin. I think he learned a lot in the process, but he also realized, I don't want my horses to be this way, because people are going to get hurt. What else has stood out to you, Ryan?
I guess there's not really one right way to do everything. You kind of got to accept the horse or even a person for who they are as an individual, and not everything's going to work the same, so it's, you can't force one method on a horse if it's not going to work for him, because you might be getting into a problem, or I guess you said overexposing. Gotta learn to be understanding with them, and learn to work with them instead of forcing them.
Yeah, work with them. I think that's key terminology. That's indicative of having that kind of relationship of trust instead of force. So it's kind of either with them or against them. So Kaysen here, he's exposing him to the next level. He's already worked with him with the flag. And so right now, it's not so much that he's trying to get him to accept that flag as it is that he is he's helping him to realize that it's okay. This is a higher level of pressure, and it can be accepted. So if he wants to move, the pressure can be increased. Movement is a form of work for him. He's not too sure about that, touching him yet. Some people call this sacking him out, and it's not so much that you're trying to sack him out. Some people say they want to get the buck out of him. I'd just as soon leave it in him, and any horse can buck, and that's fine.
So Kaysen was following him with the flag, and he kept wanting to jump or move or kick at it, and then just now Kaysen had the flag up there, and he just kind of accepted it. He slowed down, and he wasn't moving his feet so much, so Kaysen took the pressure off.
So how does this whole analogy apply with our family? I think again, as parents, there are certain things that we see in our children as far as their abilities, just like we see in this horse. He's got a good conformation, he's got a good mind, he's learning really quick. Okay, right there, that was a big indicator that he accepted that. He's really thinking about it, his ears are forward, licking his lips, and he just had a sense of being relaxed right there. So with our children, or with others that we might work with, they may exhibit undesirable behavior just like this horse just did. When they're faced with a new situation, whether it's learning something new or doing something uncomfortable, that's kind of our natural instinct, is to fight back, because we don't like change, we don't like being uncomfortable. Okay, so there, he's trying to figure it out, but he just soon almost run over Kaysen as yield to that pressure back at his hind end. So Kaysen can apply, again, the principle of establishing respect here, pressuring into his eye. And that's not necessarily, he's not trying to get him to move around him. That's not the point. But he's helping him to accept him with the flag back in other positions. Okay, so here with Kaysen, okay, he got him working pretty good on the left side. Now he's got to, seemed like he almost started over here on the right side and accepting this flag. Well, what we didn't see when the camera was off is the colt actually got away and pulled away, but it was a good point was brought out that wasn't a loss. There he goes again. So here we go, we get to see it firsthand. So he gets away, but Kaysen still keeps the pressure on, and he still yields when the horse yields. And the horse licks his lips and he thinks, okay, that wasn't the answer to pull away. Where is the answer? So he's looking. And if you present it, then they'll find it. And it's a lot more meaningful if they find it themselves rather than you trying to force it upon them. So he just found that answer. He just said, okay, well, I can look to Kaysen, things are going to be okay. So again, he just is not so much starting over each time as just starting where you left off. If there are weak spots, okay, stay out in the middle, Kaysen, so that, and again, he's not, there you go. His goal isn't so much to have the horse stand still or to move around him as it is to be able to accept this other increased level of pressure. So the horse doesn't want to lead, Kaysen can adjust. You can keep him out of the middle there. I think he's okay. There we go. So one thing he's got to be aware of is he wants him to not run over the top of him or put him in a position where he's going to get kicked. And so the horse actually needs to yield
Keep the flag up there if you can. Yeah.
more in his rib cage area. So he's gotten pretty good at yielding the front end and coming towards Kaysen. He's okay with the back end, but if he has to work at an arc, so he's presenting his ribs to him, he's not really sure about that. And so his instincts tell him, well, I either need to face up or I need to get away. And so you just keep steady pressure there until the right answer comes. And again, he'll find it, and he's just about there. So in our family, we have 6 children. We homeschool them. The same as with horses, we try to expose them to new and different experiences, things that are a little bit challenging. What that does for them is that allows them to build their confidence. So with Kaysen right now, he wasn't too sure that he wanted to be on video or wanted to, do this in front of a group. We didn't know how many people were going to show up.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, presenting in public, that is the #1 fear. Again, not the end of the world. He got away. Where's he going to go? Things are tough, so he's going to see. Look at how quick he found the answer this time. So presenting in public, that's more scary than getting bucked off by a horse or getting eaten by tarantulas or being burned by fire. When you ask people, that's the number one fear in the world is public speaking. So for somebody to do that, well, that's a bit of a challenge. But yet, if you can offer it in an environment where it's safe and something that they know about, then that helps to build their confidence. Kind of the same as with horses here too. It's not so much that we try to force our kids to do what we want. We recognize the talents and abilities that they have, and as their parents, we help to try to bring those things to the surface so that they can express them. Kind of the same as with this colt too. He has talents, abilities, and instincts. But if he's just left to his own devices, is he ever going to be able to express the potential that he has? I mean, he's a gelding. Out in the field, yeah, he might be pretty to look at, but what use is it if he doesn't use it? He's not completely yielding, but he's accepting it. When somebody's clear about where they're at, then that does help give them another layer or level of confidence, though. It might seem like it's taken a long time here with him for what we've got accomplished. We still don't have him saddled. So with children, yeah, you can help them to realize what the potential is that they have, present them with opportunities and experiences that are hopefully safe. Whatever that definition. I'm not just talking about physically safe, but just like if this horse has a really bad experience here, that's going to carry forward. So there, he's made pretty good progress. But definitely, as he learns to accept these things, which are very high pressure for him, then that builds his confidence and builds his trust in you as the trainer. Well, this is Justin. Justin's 14. I think he started his first colt when he was 8 or so. Okay. Just go ahead and I'll just help you bring him in. Okay, so what did you just do? What did you see that perhaps we didn't see?
Well, he was pulling away from Tayson, and that was because he wasn't getting his head and neck bent and his hind end given away, and he was just rooting on him. And so here, by obliging him, you can make a crisis situation and get them to break their hind end and disengage.
So you can create a crisis. Why would you want to create a crisis? What?
Well, there's lots of things when you're riding them.
So you're kind of simulating what might happen outside.
Yeah.
We're in a place where they can't get hurt. So then what was the indicator that he yielded, or what did you see there?
Well, he bent his head and neck and gave away with his... He bent his head and neck and gave away with his hind end.
Okay. But the interesting thing is Justin applied more pressure to get to that point. So it was, when he said created a crisis, it was a lot of pressure for a minute and then a lot of release.
Okay.
So it's almost like the higher the pressure, the greater the reward is when they find the relief that comes. So it might seem kind of counterintuitive because we're yeah, we're the one creating the crisis. We're the one applying all this pressure. But yet, how much more meaningful is it?
Well, here I'm getting him to come to it. It helps a little bit if Jason was getting him moving out with the flag. And if you do it up here on the shoulder, like that.
So again, this is a pretty scary thing because that flag goes down into the area where he can't see. And so he's pretty vulnerable right there. That's his big blind spot that's right in front of him. But this is a great confidence builder because if they can yield to that pressure, the unseen pressure now of that flag being in that scary zone, then that really shows that he's getting softer and more subtle, and then Justin can just kind of use the flag as an extension to be able to bring it up to his shoulder and apply a little bit more pressure to create some forward movement. Yeah.
The main thing he's doing here is getting him to come to the flag.
Okay.
The main thing he's doing here is he wants him to come to the pressure. He's wanting him to walk like he's following the flag. And it's pretty cool when you can get them where they're walking on a slack rein and that flag is there. And it's like they're following the flag, so they're coming to the pressure. Is kind of the main thing he's doing.
So why would you want him to come to the pressure? Because before you were wanting him to accept it, the pressure of you tickling him or rubbing him with your hand. Why would it be important for him to, there we go. Does that show a higher level of trust maybe?
Yeah.
More confidence.
Uh-huh. So, you know, if you just went out and did this right off to a horse, he might strike at that flag because that's pretty scary to him. But now he's thinking, oh, this isn't going to kill me. He's not real sure about it, why this would be. But you are giving him this experience in a safe environment. So if you're out riding and a sage hen flies up under your horse's nose, or grain bag flies up, or they're going to learn that they can still continue to move forward.
And when you're out of branding, then they're not trying to get away from the ground crew and stuff, and there may be you're at the Nord Fork branding or something, and you're riding towards the Nord Forks and they don't want to walk past it. This will help because they know that they can go towards the pressure, go towards what's scaring them, and trust you.
So again, applying it back to people or to a leadership situation, people that I mentor or that I work with, consult with, a lot of times they have things that pressure them and that cause them to want to fight back or react. And the scariest thing is when they can't see what it is. You know, they feel this sense of, boy, something's going to get me, but I don't really know what it is. And so as a mentor, that's what I can help people to do, is to identify what that is. And then they realize, well, hey, that's really not so scary. Just like this horse realized it's just a flag. That flag isn't going to bite me. It isn't going to strike back at me. It's an inanimate object that's being used by the trainer here as a tool. So do you guys want to get him to go up on the fence? Okay. So again, you know, he's probably to the point where we could saddle him. We're going to take one more step. This is really cool that none of these ideas are original to us. We make them original in the sense that we apply them, and they're unique only in the sense that we're unique. But we didn't create anything here. These are all things that we've learned from our mentors and trainers, specifically Brian Newbert. I think we, you know, give 80% of the credit for anything that you see here to Brian and our family, our fathers. The boys have uncles that are really handy with horses that have helped them. So the principle here is Kaysen's in a different position. He's accepted him from the ground, and now he's more up in a position where he would be when he's going to saddle him, when he's going to ride him. So what Justin just explained is he wants him to yield his hind end, so if he can step over with his outside hind foot towards Kaysen, that's really yielding that hind end and putting him over in position. If he goes past there and he runs into the rope and runs into pressure from the flag, and then he finds that sweet spot where pressure's off and he gets some scratching, and he appreciates that. Okay. So you can do this on your own. It's helpful to have somebody else. It's a little more tricky, but you know, you can simulate this. When you're on your own, the thing you want to look for is for them to step their hind end over. So whatever kind of pressure you can use, whether it's a flag or a slicker or a rope, continue to apply that pressure until their hind end moves towards you. And pretty quick they realize, okay, that's the answer that he's looking for, and they really appreciate that and find it. So he's right there. Kaysen can do a lot of work right here from where he's at, being able to simulate what he's going to be doing on his back. He wants to keep him in that position, but yet allow him the choice to leave with the consequence. So he decided to back up. Justin's just applying a little more pressure. Now a lot of pressure. That wasn't it. See now how he instead of on that last one, instead of him running back and hitting the rope, he just moved his hind end over to find where the release was. So those are the subtle things you can look for. And Kaysen can pretty quick here use his foot to scratch on him. Again, he wants to keep a good hold of the fence. If the horse decides to move, you know, he can move. He's committed to the fence. He's riding the fence. And the fence can buck you off, especially if you're trying to hang on there. So it's good to take a dally around the post, just so if they really get, you know, to jerking, they don't pull you right off the fence.
Yeah.
But this is a real.
So right now you're just teaching him to move his hind end, disengage his hind end?
That's the indicator that he's coming back to where you are, is by moving his hind end. That's not necessarily what we're trying to teach.
So you
So
want
there.
him to get relief from Jason, not Justin, right now.
Not Justin's applying the pressure, so he's getting the relief from Justin. Justin's just an extension of what Kaysen could be doing,
Okay.
but it's a little more difficult for him to apply pressure from his position. And so Justin just making it uncomfortable. Again, like was brought up earlier, this is not the right thing, so it's uncomfortable. He's getting closer. So you want him to just be right over there, right basic position, so that Kaysen's sitting where he would be if he was saddled. And there. So whatever pressure can continue to be applied until he reaches that point, and that's good. Are we good? Okay. So okay, so this little bay horse, he kind of had a pretty stressful situation mentally and physically, where he would hit the end of the rope. He was trying to find the answer, and what we were looking for him was a one indicator of him, if he's facing this way, to step over with his right hind foot and to yield and to be able to put his side over against the fence. And so he's getting that figured out now. And Justin is Justin, the one using the flag, he's just an extension of Kaysen, helping and supporting Kaysen to apply the pressure that Kaysen maybe can't as effectively from his position, being on the fence, but they're working with each other. So the real key here is that the pressure stays consistent until the behavior changes. So consistent pressure until the behavior, or until we see a different action. So what the action again that we're looking for is a step over with the right hind foot there. And then the pressure comes off. If it's not exactly what we're looking for, the pressure needs to stay on. Animals respond really well to this. How about children? I wonder, do they respond to these same principles? I think with those of us that have parents, or our parents or have children, we can see some analogies here where a child might act up, might be given undesirable behavior. They'll try different things to find what they want or what their release is. But it's really key that we stay consistent until the behavior changes. So they don't change us. We don't react to what they're doing. It might seem like Justin is being reactionary here by increasing the pressure, but he's not. He's the one that is in control. He's the one that's managing it and helping the horse to find the correct answer. When he gets there, then there is a reward. The reward is the pressure comes off with the flag. Kaysen can go to scratching on him. And the interesting principle here is the longer that it takes, now the horse is really accepting it. He's licking his lips, his head goes down, he's on a slack rein. It took him a while to find that. But the longer it takes for them to find the answer, the more meaningful it is. Sometimes if they just pick it up right off, it's almost like you have to question, did they really learn it, or was that just a fluke? And so you might want to expose them again to give them the opportunity to make the mistake so that they really learn it and get it ingrained deep in their inside of them. Do you have a story to share, Selena? Go ahead. Hi, Weston. How are you? What are they doing out here? So now Kaysen can take advantage of this position. He's not in a risk situation because he's got the hold of the fence. You know, it seemed like this little exercise, it may have taken us 15 minutes. But yet again, the horse learned a lot through it. So in my own situation with starting a new business, doing something that's new and scary, I mean, I felt a lot like this horse. It's like you try different things, you try to find the answer. You'd bump against the pressure, and it wasn't until you submit that you find the release or the relief. That's probably a little abstract, but you know, I've known for several years now that I have a mission to fulfill as far as teaching and training people. And I kind of fought against that, thinking, man, that's not me, that's not who I am. I'm a rancher, a cowboy, this is what I know, this is what I grew up doing, it's generational, it's in my blood. And why not? It's what I always ever wanted. But just kind of like the bay colt over there, when I realized that my creator had a different plan, he had more of a sense of vision in me than I had in myself. And when I finally submitted to that, then find the release. Then I find the reward that comes when you submit. And that's a hard thing to do. I don't know if anybody else struggles with that or not, but because this horse has natural instincts, he's just trying to save himself. He's just doing what he knows. And people are the same way. You know, we're quick to judge or blame people for what they do or don't do, but they're just doing what they know. So took a little time here, but we made some good progress. You know, he's leading, he's yielding, he wants to come to Kaysen to find the answers. And he's accepted him in that position. What should we do now, Kaysen?
Oh, I don't know.
You know.
One of the main reasons for what we're doing there is you can get your first ride on him without being where you can be bucked off or get hurt. You're on the fence. As long as you stay with the fence, not the horse, you're good. And so then you get your first ride on him, and it kind of helps him to be okay with you up there above him, seeing you up there above him. Just gets him used to and ready for riding. And when you're, like say if he's going to be a kid's horse or some kid that had to ride him, then you might want him to be able to get up to a fence so the kid can get on, so you don't have to stay with the kid or whatever. If they've got to get off and get their hat or something, they can do it. And it can be really helpful. When I think the greatest horseman, he was a short guy, and so he always had to have his horse up in a draw or a little washout or on a rock or a fence, and all his horses could do that. As soon as the horses saw him start walking towards something, they'd be scooting up there right with him. They'd be getting up along the fence or the rock or whatever.
Who was that?
Tom Lawrence.
Okay. So you think we're at a point we should leave him, or do you want to saddle him and move on to another horse?
Well, whatever you think.
Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and we'll saddle him, and then we'll just let him sit while you. So if you. Well, let's see.
I can borrow somebody's saddle.
You want to grab the Capriola saddle, and we'll throw that on him, and then you guys can ride out in here, and we'll do the flag exercise out here. That work? Okay, we got her coming. It's all right. It might be good just to see where we're at. Have you started many colts, Seth? Have you?
I've started a few, but I'm not a whole lot. Probably I only started about 2 or 3.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's all right. We're all learning. It's not like we have all the answers or know. So again, this is kind of a different deal. It's just a blanket. It's not going to kill him. Kaysen can let him be exposed to that, and
I should have used the flag.
that's all right. If you've got a flag and you can expose them a little bit with a flag, that's fine. Not everybody has a flag.
So when you were, what you said were sacking them out with the flag, that was kind of setting them up for this right here, wasn't it?
Yeah, everything we've done here has been for a purpose. So ultimately, this horse belongs to my father-in-law. My father-in-law is he's not an old man, but he's not a bronc rider either. And so when Kaysen turns this horse back over to him, he's going to expect that he's going to be able to get on him and go and get a job done.
Okay.
And so that's the purpose. The ultimate purpose that we have is for an older man to be able to go and ride and do a job.
Okay.
So with everything that we've done from the time that we brought him in the corral, it's been for that purpose.
Okay.
But yet, at the same time, it's not been with that focus in that we're just going to get there regardless of the cost.
Okay.
So that's why we take a little more time in preparing, and then when we get there, then the end result's going to be better.
Okay.
We hope.
Yeah.
We hope.
Okay.
So good question, though. Yeah, good question. So with all that we're doing here, we're building a lot of confidence. Well, two things. We're building confidence in the horseman, and we're building confidence in the horse.
Okay.
A lot of times, again, Tom Dorrance said, somebody asked him, how do you keep from making mistakes? Or how do you keep from making mistakes? And he said, from experience. And they said, well, how do you get experience? Well, from making mistakes. So don't be afraid of making a mistake. I mean, hopefully you can learn from others' mistakes. That's what a wise man does. An average man, he has to commit them himself. But we're all going to do it. We're all going to get bucked off. We're all going to get kicked. We're all going to make them silly mistakes that we make. But hopefully we can be safe in the process. And you can help each other out. A guy can get a lot done on his own, but it's pretty neat to see what these guys can do. And so there he's, I don't know about that. And it's kind of hard do you want Justin to throw it on? Okay. So with this, you have to be a little bit agile, and again, you're allowing him to move. We could hobble him and get him to stand there.
Yeah.
We could lay him down or do anything. If that was our goal, was just to get him saddled. We could take a lot of steps and use measures and force to do that. But again, our ultimate goal is to make a good saddle horse out of him. So Justin can just expose him to it. He can rub him with it. This, again, is just an extension of the flag or his arm or whatever else. If he wants to move, he can move.
Good.
don't have a horse, how do you
Excuse
make
me.
this work for you? I mean,
How do you saddle a horse without a horse?
well, how do you apply this? A lot of people don't have horses, but is this really applicable to life? How do you apply this to other people or relationships? Because that's what you're doing, isn't it? You're building a relationship with this horse.
Right. So, you know, how far has he come? It might be hard to measure that in a, I don't know, in a real clear way of saying, okay, this is where the horse was when we started, and 2 hours later he's being saddled. But I think if you know what you're looking for, there are ways to measure it. So the same is true with people. If you can see people as objects or as resources. You know, in other words, I need this person to work for me to build this fence. You can hire them, you can cajole them, you can pay them, you can force them to get the fence done. And if they get the fence done, then you might think, well, great, you know, that was what I wanted from them, and that was the end goal. That's one approach. The other approach would be to realize, okay, they're a person, they're developing skills and talents and confidence. How can I help them to be able to do that? Maybe it's by building this fence. That's a really hard thing. You know, physically it's hard. They got to map it out. They've got to go and do it. But when they get it done, how are they going to feel about themselves when they do something that's hard? And so again, it's exposing them, not enough that they get soured or spoiled. You know, don't overexpose them, but that's where as a mentor you've got to understand their limits and read them too, so that.
Well, the discouraging thing maybe is that you say this took a long time. Possibly you could have done this shorter with a horse. But with people, my experience has been that to move this far with a person in 2 hours, that's just unheard of. People don't normally change that easy, do they?
I think that's a paradigm, you know, whether people can change quick or not. What would it take for a person to have this kind of an adjustment in this short of a time? So Justin just did some interesting things there. He's looking out for his safety and the horse's safety. If you noticed, he reached under with his latigo. He didn't put his head down there where he could get kicked from a hind leg or struck, or you know, that's his self-preservation, his instincts. But more than that, it's what he's been taught. Before just barreling into him and tightening that cinch, he exposed him. If the horse took off, he could just let it go, and the worst thing that could happen, the saddle's going to fall on the ground. Selena mentioned earlier, we did have a horse that we had in this position right here, and he took off bucking. It was probably his third or fourth saddling, and he started bucking. The saddle tipped underneath him, and as he was bucking around the corral there, when he stopped, we realized his back leg had broke just right below the hock. And I took full responsibility for it. I mean, I was the one that was in charge. I didn't take the steps necessary to get him prepared for that. And so when I pulled the cinch up, he blew up. So back to the question, can people change this much in 2 hours? Yes, I know they can, because I've experienced it. How do they do that? A lot of times it's by facing something that's really scary and working through it. You don't realize what you have inside you until you have to dig down deep and find it. You know, if life is always easy, if we always made things easy for our horses or for our kids or for our employees, you know, they're really not going to grow that much. They're not going to progress very far or very fast. And so we've exposed him to a lot of things here today. He's faced some terrifying situations. Now, from our vantage point, it's not that scary because we realize, well, it's just a flag. But from his instincts, all of his instincts are telling him, get out of there, do whatever it takes to leave this situation. And so for him to have that shift and to be here and accepting it, that's huge strides that he's made. Can people really do that? Yeah, but yes, they can. It's a choice.
In your experience, are they often able to do it by themselves?
Would this horse be able to saddle himself?
No, that's a good context. The horse may not be self-determined enough to know what it can become. A person may, but can a person change on their own, or do they usually change? Or do they need somebody like you to help them, just like this horse? In 2 hours, this horse's personality has changed.
Uh-oh. This is the end of the world. He's coming apart. Save yourself, Justin. Yeehaw! Okay. Okay. So. Well, that was fun. All right. So he realized, I can buck this saddle. It doesn't feel so good. What did he learn? He learned, well, that wasn't
Too bad.
It wasn't too bad, but it didn't get him anywhere. So now we can go back and we can help him to learn. I mean, this is, of all the pressure that he's had, this is probably the most pressure, and in some ways the scariest thing, because now the pressure is still on him when he is moving. The saddle still stays tight, and so this is teaching him a different level. Everything that we've done today has prepared him for this. So he's trying to find the answer. He's got to feel it out. It's important that he learns to move with that saddle and with the pressure. Justin's going to keep him moving here at a walk and at a trot and at a lope. A lot of times, there he goes. So he's been in all three. He's walked, he's trotted, he's loped. A lot of times when they switch gaits, that's when they come apart. And switching gaits means when they break into a trot, when they break into a lope, because it feels different. And so it's good to expose them to those things when you're on the ground, and then when you're on their back, it's not quite so scary.
Explain that concept of movement. Why do you have to have movement? Why do we have to have movement in our lives?
Okay, so there's three things that we're working on here now. We talked about the other fundamentals of building trust, building confidence, and now we're looking for movement. He could accept the saddle when it was tight, when he was standing there, but can you go do a job on a horse that's standing there? I mean, it's pretty tough to rope a calf, it's pretty tough to check a fence, to go move cows, to irrigate, do whatever you might want to do to have a fun ride. If your horse is stuck in the middle of the trail, they've got to be able to move. And with people, it's true too. If you're afraid to move when the pressure's on, you're pretty limited as to what you can accomplish in life. Now this horse is learning that the pressure isn't going to come off, that he can move, that things are okay. He hasn't fully accepted it. He's still really trying to feel it. And Justin's being patient and waiting for him. So a mistake that I see with some horsemen, trainers, would be that they may get him saddled, get him cinched, and then step right on. That's a pretty good recipe for a wreck. Just because he stands there while you saddle him doesn't mean that he's going to accept the pressure. Another mistake would be is to try to direct him. So now at this point we're getting some direction or some controlled movement. At first it was just important that he move, that he just get out and feel the pressure and move. So that's the first step. Then second would be direction, and that's what Justin's doing with the halter, is just providing some guidance, helping him to realize his boundaries. You know, before he could bounce off the fence corral, and now he's bumping up against the rein, or what that rope would simulate your rein. At some point you're going to want to be on his back, and when you take a hold of him you're going to want him to yield, and so you can simulate that on the ground. And the lighter he is on the ground, the lighter he's going to be when you're on his back.
Yeah.
And the last thing that you're looking for is speed. So if you do things in wrong order, if you try to direct before he moves, you can't go anywhere. There's no movement to direct. I mean, he had to be moving first before you could steer him. If you add speed too soon, then again, that's a recipe for a wreck. But if you get movement first, and then you learn to guide that movement, and then you can speed it up, slow it down, or control the speed. And so that's what Justin's doing here, and what he did before. You know, he asked him to go into the different gates. Started out at a walk, into a trot, into a lope. That's where the speed principle comes in. So with people, it's the same way. Sometimes we have a goal that we want, and we're just going to go headlong into that and dive into it. Well, that's one approach. But if you don't have direction, then the simple fact of speeding up may be that you're
A disaster.
Yeah, you're going the wrong direction.
He's developed in steps or stages here. Like you said, jumping on him now would be jumping 5 or 6 steps. He's not ready.
Mm-hmm.
But he's taking some steps to. Are people the same?
So do people develop the same way? Yeah, I think there are levels that we go through as people. When we try to skip a level, a lot of times that leads to frustration. We get impatient with ourselves sometimes, or with our horse, because we think that, he's not progressing fast enough. Here we've been working with him for 2 hours and we're still not on him. Man, you guys must be pretty sorry cowboys. Other guys would say, hey, I'm on my horse in 20 minutes. And that's fine. If they can do it, and if that produces them the results for them that they want, then great. But I think that is true with people too, is that there are levels, or there are steps. When those steps are bypassed or jumped, then that leads to frustration, or somebody getting hurt, or it says somewhere that we learn line upon line. But as you see with this horse, I don't know, it'd be interesting to sit back and analyze and say, so how many levels has he come from the time that we stepped in the corral with him 2 hours ago? Where's he at compared to where he was? And it's happened relatively quickly. And so I think with people that's very true too. Progress can happen fast. One, when you have somebody as a good guide or trainer or mentor for you, and two, when you're willing. Using your judgment too as to how much to do. You can overdo it, in that if your horse accepts something and you keep doing it, they're either going to get bored, or they're going to think that you want a different answer, so they'll try something different, and then you've just made an issue out of something that wasn't even there.
Oh, okay.
And then it becomes harder, because it was like, well, I accepted it, and now what's up?
That's when we had
So yeah, a lot of our experiences come from bad experiences.
Yeah.
Or it's how you get judgment. So we'll pick a quitting point here pretty quick. I believe that we have a creator. Call him God, or that sometimes he exposes us to things that we don't understand why. And we think, man, you know, this isn't fair. I don't know why I have to go through this. But we can't see the bigger picture of what he might be preparing us for later down the road that he can see.
Yeah.
And just like with this horse, we don't know what he's going to be exposed to later on when my father-in-law rides him. You know, he has a lot of grandkids. We hope that he'll be a kid's horse someday. You know, and as Justin is the trainer here, it behooves him to do the best job that he can to train him, because that is the name that he's going to wear. As he was started by Justin and started by Kaysen. And so that will, you know, that'll go with him through the rest of his life. Again, that's the foundation. And so rather than, you know, being like this bay horse here and fighting our head and thinking, woe is me, you know, this is too hard, I can't accept this, why do I have to go through this?
I got a question. Is there a point where you should
There.
call it a day on something like this, where he's just fighting it? Or would that, or if you did say, I give up, you know, we've been doing this for a half hour, would that have just taught the horse that, okay, if I keep shying like that, that's how I get released?
Good question. So is there a point where you just quit, where it's just not working? One of my mentors his name is Bud Williams, and he teaches more about stock handling than horsemanship, but he said patience is doing the right thing until it works. If you question whether it's the right thing, then you should probably stop.
Yeah.
Because if you're questioning if it's right, it probably means that there's doubt and you're not being confident.
Right. And a horse will read off that. He knows.
Yeah, a horse knows you can come back to it another day. So you may not be in the right frame of mind.
Okay.
So yeah, you're the steward over the horse. You're the one that's responsible. Use your judgment. It doesn't mean that he won. You know, when you get into that point where I'm just going to stick with it by golly till you submit,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the best either, I don't think, because again, winning a war is knowing when to quit and when to stick with it. There are times when you just say, okay, I can't do it, and that's happened to me a lot of times when we're moving a bunch of cattle. You know, we'll get to a point when we realize we're running out of daylight, we're not going to get this job done, let's just quit. Let's just come back tomorrow with fresh horses, let the cattle fill up on feed. We might have to start right back over where we started, and that has happened just too many times.
Trying to get him across the creek over there, but
Yeah,
creek
yeah. Last year was a good example of that. So yeah, use your judgment. And
let's just pause right here for a minute, and I want to give a clear and concise answer to the question that was asked by a participant in the audience. And the question was, in case you didn't hear it or understand it, was, can a person experience this kind of change that this horse has undergone in this relatively short period of time? But we've seen this horse come from just being run into the corral, perhaps never having been haltered before, and at this point he's at the point where he has established some basic respect. He's been able to move out, and he's to the level where he can now accept a saddle. So how does that work with people, or can it really work with people? Well, there's two principles here that I believe are key to understanding how transformation can happen. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about transformation. The horse didn't know the principles that it knows now when it walked into the corral literally an hour before. Now we've edited a few things out of this video, but they're not more than just a few minutes. So literally what you've seen here is what went on. As if you had been sitting on the corral fence back in June of 2012 and watching this. It's only been an hour. We're only an hour into it, and he's to the point where he can be saddled. There are a lot of principles that this horse has learned in this short period of time. And what causes an individual to be able to learn quickly? Well, there's two things that I want to talk about here. First is repetition, and second is intensity. Repetition means establishing a new habit. If you do something over and over again, it will become a habit and it will become second nature to you. And that will be your new mode of operation. Repetition can take time. The second principle that can cause transformation or cause a change in behavior is intensity. Now, intensity, we've seen some things happen here with this colt that were very intense for him, such as being exposed to a flag. That's pretty intense. It caused some emotions to surface in this horse, principally fear. Fear triggered the action of wanting to get away. And there were times when he did get away, and he did experience that action of being able to run or take flight. But yet he realized then a new thought that this didn't get the result that I wanted, so let's try a different behavior. So if you follow that pattern with what occurred with this horse, first there was a thought, hey, I've got to get out of here. That led to maybe the emotion of fear, or that thought or that emotion might have occurred simultaneously. And the reaction is to leave, to take off. Now, the result from that was not favorable. It wasn't in his best interest to run away, because it just meant that he had to run further and faster until he submitted, and until the horseman or the mentor could see, okay, there's been a change, and now let's present a different opportunity. Let's ask him again, are you ready to stop? Are you ready to accept the flag here? Are you ready to accept it here? And all of this was done in preparation for this step of being able to accept the saddle. With individuals, those same two principles can cause a transformation at an individual level, at a personal level. But when you're exposed to something over and over again, that's repetition. Repetition can cause a change in behavior. And also intensity can cause a change in behavior in individuals. An example of that, an extreme example of that, can be a car accident. There is high emotion, very high intensity, and it causes very vivid images in most individuals that have gone through that experience, because the intensity is so high. So if that works in that scenario, can it work in changing a behavior? Can it work in changing a habit, such as a habit that you recognize in yourself that you want to change? Yes, it can. But what do you need to do as an individual to be able to cause that? Be more intense. our body and our mind, and that connection, and the connection with our inner self or our spirit is the means of being able to learn and to process the experiences that we have here in life. It goes through certain channels, and while those cannot be there cannot be a shortcut necessarily, those things can be advanced. And so let me try to explain in a concise manner what I'm talking about here as we're paused here with this horse at this moment before he's ready to move to the next step. Maybe we can look at this principle on an individual basis. We learn through our senses. Our senses are sight, feel, kinesthetic sense, taste, and touch, and our hearing or auditory. So we know that that's how information comes into our mind, and our mind then processes it. It goes through a portion of our brain which is called the reticular activating system, and that portion of our brain filters out what is acceptable and what is good for us and what is unacceptable and what should be rejected. This filter is necessary. Its whole function is to keep us alive, and it's to keep us safe. But there's sometimes when we want to change a behavior because it's no longer serving us, or we realize that it's actually damaging to us in some sense, be that physically, spiritually, emotionally, or socially, and sometimes even financially. Some of the behaviors that we have or the habits that we have are not in our best interest. So we recognize that, and that's the first step, is to become aware. Okay, I need to change. And we try to change, but yet we keep falling back into old habits. The real challenge here is that this new information, this new insight or new bit of intelligence perhaps has not reached through this filter of the reticular activating system to get into our mind. Think about this in simple terms. We learn something new. Our mind doesn't know if that's really going to be in our best interest or not, but it does know what we've always done. And so by default, it resorts back to what we've always done rather than embracing something new, even if what we've done in the past causes continual pain and frustration and disappointment and regret. Our mind will automatically default back to what it already knows before it will embrace something new. So that's where repetition and intensity comes in. The way that we get through that filter to get this new intelligence or new bit of information into our mind is to do it intensely. So we've seen this with the horse. We've seen it. He had something new presented to him. It wasn't accepted, and so he behaved in such a way that self-preservation came in. He was reverting back to what he always knew. He realized that didn't work for him, so then he was again open to something new. When it was presented to him the second, third, sometimes fourth or fifth time, then he's ready and willing to accept it. So there's kind of two things going on here at the same time. There's repetition of presenting the same thing, the same principle over and over again, and there's also the factor of intensity, of him having to work, sometimes even work up a sweat. And because of that intensity, the physical intensity for this horse, he's willing to learn. So can we, as individuals, can we mimic that? Can we recreate that in our own circumstances? Through some of the mentors that I've had, they've taught me how to do this. One way is through declarations. A declaration is something that you say which is activating your auditory senses. And so you say a declaration or an affirmation in first person present tense as if it is fact and reality, because your subconscious mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. And Einstein explained this as imagination is greater than knowledge. And that is a true principle. So if we can, I hate to use the word, but if we can trick our mind into thinking that something is real, it will accept it as truth. And pretty soon it will begin to create that. So that's the way that we can get through this filter of the reticular activating system and get into the subconscious mind and make it part of our programming, is to say it as if. So that's one way. That's using our auditory senses and also our speaking sense. So there's two. We're speaking it, we're hearing it. Another way is to use something like a vision board, or to create an image of what we want to be or what we want to have, and we activate our visionary sense by looking at that image. Our vision is our most receptive sense. So of all of the senses, the vision is the highest and most receptive. Now with some people they may be stronger in other areas, but overall, from the research that I've done, the vision is the top. So if you really want to get a change of behavior occurring in your life, then activate that sense. When you do that, when you look at what you want and you experience the feelings of having that already, again, your subconscious mind accepts that as reality. That's how it is. And then it begins to look for everything around you to make that possible, because that's the new reality. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that what we've seen here in this transformation with this horse in a period of an hour, realize that with yourself, it can happen fast. The old idea of taking 21 days or however long it is to change a behavior, that's repetition, and that's hard work, and it's making the decision over and over and over again every day until your behavior changes. And sometimes even then your mind hasn't changed, and so you will still revert back to the behavior that you had before you started the process. So if you can combine that principle with intensity, then your likelihood of being successful in changing a behavior and transforming goes up exponentially. So let's go back to the video here. Okay, so what we saw here, I mean, this horse really came apart. He started bucking, and you might think, well, man, we just said we want to leave the buck in him and not get it out of him. So did we do something wrong here? Well, perhaps he could have taken a little more time in preparation, and the end result wouldn't have been that he blew up and bucked. But yet, was it bad? Was it bad? If you look at the horse afterwards, he's looking for another answer. Again, he experienced something physically, emotionally, and mentally here, which was pretty frightening for him. And he had the thought, well, I need to get away from this pressure. And so he reacted. And where did it get him? Well, it didn't get him away from the pressure. He's still carrying the saddle. So now he's ready to look for a new answer. He's ready to find something else, and so it wasn't all bad. In fact, it wasn't bad at all. It really was just a reaction to what went on. Now, individuals may react also to experiences that they have. And in a leadership position, when you find that somebody is reacting, you can go back and you can look for the cause of that. So in other words, it's easy to point out with this horse, well, the cause was the saddle. He didn't buck when he didn't have the saddle. So let's just take the saddle off and everything will be okay. Let's remove the pressure and he can go back and be fine and feel good about himself. Well, that's true, but is he going to be able to fulfill his purpose and his mission and what he's responsible to do if you do that? The fact of the matter is, no, he's not. If you take away the pressure of the saddle, his usefulness as a horse goes down, and he's basically useless to us in our position of what we want to accomplish with this horse, of being able to ride him, rope off him, move cattle. He can't do any of that unless he comes through this point of accepting this saddle. On a leadership position, how can you help the individuals that you have stewardship over to accept the pressure that they have upon them and to move through it rather than reacting and trying to back off and get away from the pressure? Well, first of all, it starts with accepting the responsibility that you have yourself. There's a certain amount of pressure that's placed upon you as a leader, whatever that capacity may be, whether it's a leader of self, and it starts there, of children in a teaching position, ecclesiastical position, a government position, whatever it might be, as an employer or as an employee. There is always an element of leadership. So first, accept the pressure, not as a bad thing, but as something that is teaching you and helping you to move to a new and a higher level. So you have to get through the pressure of the current level before you can move up to a new level. And that's the same thing that we're experiencing here with this horse. He accepted everything at the level before being saddled, and now the next step is to accept the saddle. The next step will be to accept the saddle and the rider. And the next step will be to go out and to begin to do simple jobs on him. And then onward and upward. And there really is no end to the levels that you can accomplish either with livestock or with people. So again, to reiterate, what we just experienced here and having this horse come apart and start bucking, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Because we see and he sees that it didn't get him away from the pressure. And so now there's an opportunity to teach. He's more open-minded. He's ready to learn.
We got our mission accomplished with that horse. We're going to work with some other horses here, but to recap on some of the things that we talked about, we started with not knowing where the horse was. We had to talk his language. We had to discover what he wanted and work with his natural instincts. We built trust, we built confidence in him, and then we were able to start to implement what we wanted to accomplish. First by using the flag, and then by going ahead and getting him saddled. His response was, and sometimes it was pretty negative. It looked like, man, we're not getting anywhere. Interestingly enough, what one of my mentors has said is that very often things get worse before they get better. And so that's where you've got to use your judgment and realize that just because things are seemingly falling apart and getting worse, that's when you need to redouble your efforts and say, okay, I know that I'm very close to a breakthrough if I just persist. And with mentoring and working with people, that's what I've been able to find. My own experience has been when I've come up against challenges, I'll try to back off and get away from the pressure. Just like we saw with this horse trying to get away from the pressure of the bag being waved around his head. He looked for relief, and he didn't find that relief until he submitted, until he accepted that, okay, I can do this. And it was a hard thing. And I think the same's true for people too, and the people that I've worked with and with myself. When we finally submit, when we finally say, okay, I can do this, it's seemingly hard, then we find the relief. And so we're going to do another little confidence builder here. You wouldn't necessarily need to do this on a first ride, but it wouldn't hurt either. What we're going to do here is just another level of what Justin did with the flag and getting them to, when Justin was using the flag in front of him, getting him to move into the pressure. We're going to simulate that with this rope to be able to move into the pressure and find relief in forward movement. That's really important for a horse to understand, is that when they move forward, they can get relief. And as a horseman, what Justin and Kaysen are going to be focused on is they're going to apply the pressure, not me, for anything that isn't forward movement. So as soon as they show an indication, whether it's just a slight movement forward or a step forward, the pressure is going to come off. Now, why would this be important? When you're outside and you're exposing a horse to something new, it might be outside on the first ride. If you have some rules established here, like what Kaysen has established, you notice his horse will yield his hind end and will step away. So he's got him so he can stop. So I'd say before you do this, let's establish that. That's being able to pick up on one rein and getting them to step over and stop. So our tendency is, when a horse starts to move too fast, we'll grab a hold of both reins and we'll just kind of bear down. Well, the horse has a lot of power in his neck to be able to push through that. And that's something that's not natural for them to know how to do, is to yield to that facial pressure to get them to stop. What is more natural is for them to yield their hindquarters, and that disengages them. It's kind of like throwing your truck into neutral, and it takes all the power away so that you can control that movement. So we're going to make sure that, first of all, we have those things. So if you have a horse that will yield his hind end and will move forward, you can get a lot done with just those things. Obviously, the better you can direct him, the better rein he has, the more useful he's going to be. And I think that's a huge concept with people, because I don't know, I guess I'll speak for myself. I don't know what others do, but a lot of times when I feel pressure, my instinct is to back off. I see something that's scary to me, that I perceive as scary. It might not be scary to somebody else. That's my perception. And there is a sense of pressure when you come up against that, and so your tendency is, yes, back off, look for a different answer. Now that's a choice. There are times when, we don't have to push ourselves up against things that might be scary to us, whatever that might be. But as people, we realize, if we're going to progress, that oftentimes we have to do things that challenge us. And so the same, just like with these horses, if they never had to do something that was challenging, they'd be very limited as to their ability to progress and become what they potentially could become. So yeah, move forward into the pressure, and you find the relief that's on the other side of the pressure. But it's not until you move forward that you find relief. You think you find relief by backing up and by getting away from it, but that relief is only momentary, and then generally the next time you come up against that obstacle, it's going to be more scary or worse than if you'd have just crossed it the first time. Okay, so we'll just up the pressure here a little bit And we're not trying to trip Justin's horse. We're just trying to get him to move forward. So he's going to see what I'm doing over here by swinging this rope as an insurmountable obstacle, which is good. You know, we want him to use his good judgment. But more important than that, we want him to trust in us. Okay, so Kaysen's horse saw it. He's thinking, man, I can't do that. Now I've got to be pretty careful here. So Kaysen keeps the pressure on until he's committed to going forward. So anything that isn't forward movement over in this direction is a wrong answer. So he comes up against it again. He's like being really wary, really wary, really wary. Like, man, I can't cross that thing. It's scary, hard. I don't want to. I can't do it. Doubt comes in, fear, frustration. He's going to blame Kaysen. He's going to try anything. Oh, how about that? Hey, look. Oh, how about that? That wasn't so hard. How about moving forward? Is that an answer? So they did it once. Can they do it again? How much easier is it going to be the second time? So I've got to be real careful. And so Justin's horse is more just following Kaysen's horse. He hasn't really had to face the full pressure of it. And that's all right. It's okay to follow others. There'll come a point when we can't any longer. So generally, if a horse is moving forward in a controlled manner, it's limited as to what it can do as far as bucking or getting you off his back. This can be done with the rope, it can be done with the flag, where you just apply pressure and you get him to move through that pressure. We'll change it up just a little bit. Same principle. Let's go the other direction here. So this is going to be a pretty scary thing for Justin's horse to go through. I'm a little more lenient in letting him find that answer. And each time I can increase the pressure a little bit as their confidence builds. And this basically just teaches them that when they're faced with an obstacle that seems really hard, they can get through it. If you tell them that they can, they learn to trust you instead of so much their instincts, which are telling them, hey, that's wrong. Good. So it can get awfully frustrating when it seems like things are just going backwards. And the tendency is to give up at that point and to try something different. But if you know and you have confidence in what you're doing, then just stay with it. especially if you've seen it work before. Then you know it will work again. Doesn't mean that you can't adjust and maybe try a little bit different angle, but what we're after here is just committed forward movement. So it's important to be purposeful, but not let your emotions take over and become frustrated and mad. You know, it's not the horse's fault. It might seem, well, this is a battle that you'd want to quit, or you may not have been a good one to start. But if it isn't resolved here, more than likely it's going to come up somewhere else. Maybe it's in a branding pen when you're trying to drag calves through the ground crew and then he blows up and gets somebody hurt, or might be having to go through brush or trees or something. Okay, so we'll maybe switch here a little bit and I'll just help Justin get movement. That's okay. Let's get movement and then we can okay. There you go. Get a hold. There we go. There we go. It's not that we lost. We just adjusted. Go ahead and head around, Kaysen. Okay. Maybe one more time each way and then we'll call that good, huh?